Okay, thank you. Welcome to the Nonprofit Coach webinar. Use the Becoming a Grant Writer online course to advance your career and skills. We're here to answer questions about the course and to explore your questions about being a grant writer and this aspect of the fundraising career. I am Elizabeth Finlayson. I am the CEO and lead coach of the Nonprofit Coach, and our mission is to create a fairer, more equitable, and inclusive world filled with empathy and beauty. And we do this by supporting our nonprofit clients through coaching, strategic planning, fundraising, board training, and group support sessions. I want to frame this for people because we saw in our surveys that sometimes people didn't quite understand what these were. These are free bi-monthly webinars. We have general topic overviews, or sometimes we dive into a specific slice of a broader topic. We have guest speakers. We're so lucky to have Barry with us today, but they are not meant to replace any kind of paid training that you get from us or anyone else. So if that gives a little bit of context. And so I'm going to turn this over for Barry to introduce himself.
Hi, everyone. I am, as the big screen says, Barry A. Benson. I have been in fundraising for next year, I think it's going to be 20 years. And I started out doing corporate relations, that sort of thing. And it kind of evolved into doing mostly grants related work. Along the way, I have been interim executive director and full-time long-term executive director of several organizations. And all of this has been really mightily helpful in my work doing grants, because it helps me really understand the kind of the internal networks that contribute to successful grants outreach. So I'm up there in years. I've done it all. I've done everything from literacy to human services to arts to museums in Texas and hospitals in Tanzania. And I love grant writing. I love the variety that it offers me as a consultant. I'm at any given moment thinking about and working on a whole variety of different things. So I'm looking forward to answering questions and to sharing the bit of witness or wisdom rather that I've gained along the way.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you, Barry. So first, I want you to know a little bit more about us as a team. So you've just heard our introductions, but we came together as separate consultants, realizing there was a need for online education around fundraising, and also that Barry has all this wealth of expertise in teaching grant writing as well as actually doing grant writing. And so we wanted to make sure that we had an offering for people to take an online course. And so we're going to take a little bit of time to talk about what that is. So this online course that Barry has created has 6 segments of core content that are created and led by Barry. And then I come in with some study assist and some questions around that. So I'll come and follow up every segment that Barry has, talking about additional questions or thoughts. And then he's created these study assist homework assignments that go with it, that are exercises, tips, questions, and key ideas. And you could really think about as a writing course, you want to actually be doing some of the writing in order to be able to really grow and progress and to struggle with something rather than just think it in your head, which feels like you may already understand it. So each segment has these deep dives and the study assists, as well as the core content. And the things that we cover in here are what types of funding are available and how to match your organization's needs to existing funding types, how to create the most competitive proposal, or how to discover what funders are looking for. Why don't you take some of these, Barry?
Sure. We look at the contents, the sort of innards of a grant proposal, and what goes into every single grant proposal, what goes into some grant proposals, and kind of the backstory, the rationale for all of this. You want to make your grant proposal stand out, and we offer a few tips and kind of some nuances that really will help on that front. We talk about, I think you said what to include and what not to include, Elizabeth, and that's really, really important. There are just some things that always have to be part of a grant proposal, and then there are always questions about whether or not it's helpful to include other things. And then how do we evaluate your grant proposal, and just as importantly, how others will be evaluating your grant proposal. So we, in this course, give you some insight into how program officers and board members of foundations will be looking at grant proposals that you submit, so that you in turn can be reviewing them that way before you send them off.
I think one thing that helped for me, I've been doing grant writing a long time when I had met Barry, but I really appreciated his dual perspective of having been an executive director and a grant writer. And he really brings that to how you approach grant writing in the course, which I benefited from personally as I went through the material. So we're going to go and take a moment to look inside at the course, see if this link works. All right.
Hey, well, so Elizabeth, while you do that, can I just add a fun fact for the group? It's sort of a bonus for attending today's webinar. For those of you who sign up, for the course, I'm a cat guy, and I have one cat who hears me talking all the time and is always kind of trying to jump up on my lap when she hears me talking. So you will see moments where I'm kind of reaching down throughout the grant webinar, and you'll see me doing that today too, because she's right here by my side listening to me talk, trying to jump up on my lap. So yeah, there's a little bit of an insider, bit of fun information.
All are welcome, even cats.
Yes.
So this is the nonprofit coach page where many of you went to actually sign up for today. When you would come in here, if you go to the online course in grant writing, if you click in there, wanting more information about it. So what'll come up here is it'll talk about some of the things we just went over on the slide. There is an introductory video from Barry here, and then we go into a deeper course outline. And I know if I were trying to figure out whether I wanted to take a course, I would want to know really what's in it. You could see these first three segments are really about that preparation phase. I don't know if you've ever had that moment of sitting and staring at the blank page and not knowing what to write. By the time you get to the writing in here, you're ready to do it because it comes in segments 4 and 5 and into the other pieces that go with that. So it shows you exactly what to do there. And then once you've signed up, as you can see, I am signed up and I click into the Hello Elizabeth. If I go into online course members, I'm going to show this to you because you've come to the webinar here today, but you would not be able to see this normally because you had not yet signed up. If you go into the grant writing course with Barry Benson, exclamation point, let's give it a second to cross over.
Okay. Hey, Elizabeth, sorry to interrupt yet again. Are you, there is a slide that says becoming a grant writer. Were you intending to share your screen to show what the actual click-through process is?
I appreciate it. I did not realize it was not sharing, so let me reshare. Thank you so much. And this is why we do those checks, right? Thank you, I appreciate that. All right, so I am going to reshare in here. Apparently when it clicked through, it did not share. Okay, so now you should be able to see the online course inside the website. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right, thank you. That was a good catch. Okay, so here inside this, so as I was saying, we're on the Nonprofit Coach website. Over under online course was where you could see the outline. And then once you have signed up, you can, you'll be able to see your own name. It'll say that, and you come over to online course members and grant writing course with Barry Benson. So just to share that path with you again. And as you go through, you can see here there is a welcome video from me, and then you have these actual segments here. So this is where the instruction comes with Barry, and the deep dive with me, and then these PDFs are what have the assignments and the homework. So I'm going to click on one, and you could just tell me if you could actually see it or not. Otherwise, I will reshare. Can anyone see a page with red polka dots on the left?
Yes.
Okay, so this is what the study assists look like. There's one for, I think, each segment. And so it goes with that. So now you've had the instruction, but you also have these pieces that go with it. So I am done sharing those pieces, but I wanted you to be able to see what it was we were talking about. And we'll go back to our slides here. All right, you should now be seeing a slide. Is that true? All right, excellent. I see that there's some comments in the chat, so I'm just going to stop for a moment. And yep, all right. Thank you, Zuina, for calling out the technological issue we were having. We've got someone else joining. Okay, so now we're going to take a couple polls because it's helpful for us to know how this material lands with you. And so I'm going to launch it right now. And we're just looking to find out, do you currently do grant writing for your position? Maybe you're looking to do that, or you already do, or you do not. And then what brought you here to learn about grant writing careers? Are you looking for your first or your next career? Are you looking to increase skills in a current career? Are you looking for a pay increase or move to a new position? Or do you just have an interest in grant writing? All of these are completely legitimate answers. And you can have more than one answer for those. So great. Oh, a few more people answering. All right, I will share results here because I think it is helpful to know who is here. So you can see that several people here do grant writing for their position, and a few people do not yet. We've got people who are looking for their first or their next career. Definitely for everybody, there's an interest in grant writing. And then there's a kind of mixed among the others. So thank you. Thank you for sharing that. All right, we're going to move on to the next part here. All right, so I want to take a step back and just kind of look at grant writing as a productive fundraising method because it is not the only way to raise money, but it does have technical skills associated with it. So sometimes it's just helpful to move past assumptions a little bit. And here are just some statistics that we had found that were from Foundation Center's report they did. And what I thought was interesting versus some of the other Foundation Center reports that you can see about foundations and how many they are and how many are committed, that this one actually speaks specifically to funding, to the numbers submitted and the funding. So you can see that a third received fewer than 50 proposals, and 38% of them funded at least half of the proposals. This seems pretty good. And if you look at the last piece that's on here, that if the foundations actually give smaller dollar amounts, they're funding a larger share of the grant request. So you can see if the foundations were really big and they're well known, they're getting a lot of requests and then they're not getting as well funded. So something to think about as we look at our funding strategies. 6% received more than 1,000 proposals each. 11% of them funded at least half the proposals. So you can see these differentiations. And then overall, 35% funded 50% or more of the grant requests. So percent, a little confusing there. But you can just see that this is something that is a viable fundraising method and that it's an important, I think of it as part of the fundraising diet of an organization. Is there anything you want to add to this, Barry?
Yeah, there is. Thank you. I find these numbers really encouraging. I'm a little surprised by them too, where I was when we talked about them earlier. I find them to be really, really encouraging. And I also think that they reflect the changing landscape of the grant funding world. And, you know, it used to be in sort of the traditional model, there would be kind of pet causes or pet organizations that a lot of foundations would be supporting. Traditionally, you know, over the years, they would just re-up their grant every year for the organizations that they favored. Now there's a lot more interest, and with that competition on the part of organizations, you know, seeking a grant funding, the foundation grant making model is really evolving fast. It was before COVID, and it's really been changed a lot by COVID. If you talk to any insiders, you know, career grant writers, grant makers, everybody will tell you that we have no idea where this is going to land and how it's looking. But we do know that last year, a lot of funding opened up, a lot of opportunities became available for small to medium-sized nonprofit organizations in particular, just to give them the boost, which was clearly needed as the pandemic was settling in. So I would just say to everybody, stay tuned, and we should do more webinars where we share this kind of information, because in 6 months it could be quite different. It'll be very interesting to see which trends kind of get traction and continue.
I think that's a great point, and I have to say, being in a lot of development conversations and all kinds of blogs and webinars and all that, there's also a lot of critiques being centered at foundations, maybe not for the first time, but I think more vocally and by a larger number of people as we're looking at racial equity conversations. And so I think it is, we are in a fasten your seatbelts moment. I think there's a lot that's shifting between the pandemic and racial equity and all these things. So I think it's one of those things that's important to kind of keep on top of, because it does shift. So I want to look at this idea of career path, and this is something that Barry and I've talked about a lot as we were putting together this course, is how do grant skills benefit people in their career? I think anecdotally, we know that it has benefited us in our career, and we wanted to make sure that we had factual information that backs that up as well. Later, we'll talk more about the anecdotal parts, but right now we're going to talk more about information. So one thing that's been a really interesting shift, let's say over the last 40 years in the fundraising and nonprofit landscape, is that people typically, when they became the executive director of an organization, had come up through programs, and they were expected to be experts in the area of that nonprofit. And about the time that I was coming into the field, of also about 20 years ago, you were starting to see this shift, that more people were coming up through a fundraising pathway, and they understood that executive leaders needed to know how to fundraise, and it was such a critical part of their job. And the executives who refused to fundraise or didn't see it as their job are beginning to fall away. And so whether it is really important to you that you're on this program pathway and you are absolutely committed to working with, say, homeless women, or whether you are already in a fundraising pathway and that's your area, in both pathways, grant writing skills are important. And you'll see that kind of coming up here. So we did an analysis of, I think it's like, you'll see in the next slide, it's like over 800 job listings that are out there. And one of the things you can see is that there are these 3 different ways that grant writing shows up in jobs right now. So one, I think this completely makes sense. These positions, these entire positions that are centered around this. So you see this in manager of foundation and government relations. Government grant writing and foundation grant writing can be a little bit different, right? But very similar. It's all wrapped in this one position. This is everything they're doing. In this one, and actually this is kind of the role I started in my career, it's part of a range of fundraising duties. So maybe you're assisting special events, and maybe you're helping with an appeal. You're definitely doing a lot of database work. And then you may be assisting on a grant, or you may be allowed to write grants that are below a certain dollar amount. That becomes part of your fundraising duties. And here in this last one, you can see this is Associate Director of Education. This person, it is not, they are not fundraisers, but we've seen many successful nonprofits in which fundraising is part of the broader culture across an organization, and particularly people who are specialists in their area. Maybe the grant writer in their at their organization can't get into the technical aspects of that person's work, or maybe they're going to partner together to create the text for grant proposals. But no matter what, you see over and over again in organizations, you have these program positions in which people are required to do some or all grant writing for their position. So I'll stop there for you, Barry, to jump in if you've got some comments.
Yeah, I was just recalling how many times I've seen, especially small organizations, take an all hands on deck approach to grants. There's an interest in and emphasis on cranking out grant proposals for the organization, because there's just so much more reliance on grants as part of a nonprofit's a staple of their diet, I think is the way you put it. And so I've even seen organizations where they block a couple of days and have all staff come in, and they divide up some of the usual suspect foundations, and they have people write grant proposals. I'm not sure that I'm a huge fan of this approach, but it really does illustrate both how much interest there is on the part of foundations in getting grant proposals out, and also how much of an expectation there is on for people to have basic grant skills. And so it's really something. It reminds me of, in the early days of computers, people would put on their resumes that they had basic computer skills. They knew how to navigate Microsoft and stuff, and it was considered something extra. And now people tend not to do it because everybody does it. And I see grant writing going in the same direction, where it's really it's considered so important and so essential for any nonprofit organization that there's increasing expectation that everybody's going to be able to handle it. So that creates a bit of internal competition. In some situations where those with the best grant writing skills may be more inclined to excel within the organization.
Yeah, that's a really great point. So as we look into the next slide here, so this is just a short sheet on the analysis, and I've got a more visual slide on this on the next one for those of you who like to see to know. So we analyzed 898 job listings on MPO.net, and it was interesting. So of those, 10% of all the jobs in there included grant writing in the job duties. But when you broke that out, of the fundraising jobs, 45% of all the jobs included grant writing. Now, after fundraising, the next highest one was actually program management, which I thought was interesting. Trailing behind that was advocacy was the next one. But it was interesting that of all the different areas that could be in there, it was basically you're a fundraiser, or if you're in program, again, you may be asked to be doing some grant writing. I thought this was really interesting. It's about 20% of all the executive and senior management jobs included grant writing in the job duties. So I think that does speak a little bit to that pathway conversation, and it may be that there might be some more oversight versus actual writing in those, or a polishing off after another staff member has done it. But to just think about, as we're looking at our career pathways, having that skill and where it fits. All right, so let's look at this visually, if this is helpful for you here. So you can see, again, of all job listings, it was 10%, and those include like everybody who's doing, everything from answering phones or traveling to a different country so it's like all jobs, part-time, full-time, et cetera. And of the fundraising ones, it was 45%, program management, 28%, and then 20% of senior and executive management. So let's stay up for just 1 second. So this to me was just fascinating though, because I looked into this as a hunch, and I was just excited to see that it was true. So what was interesting is that with each salary categorization, the percentage of job listings that were requiring grant writing goes up. So you can see under 40,000, you can call it, only 2% of those positions required any kind of grant writing. And you could think, again, part-time, full-time, any. As you start getting into that 40% and higher, that expectation jumps quite significantly. 60%, the trend keeps going up. As we get to 80%, or 80,000, we're at 38% of the jobs. And then at 100,000, it's still a significant amount, right? But it goes down a little bit. And you can see maybe at this level, it might be more supervisory versus the actual grant writing one's own self. But you can see that if you're looking for yourself as like, what kind of career do I want? What kind of pathway? How do I create advancement in this field? This is one of the ways that you might be able to accomplish that. I'm just going to stop for any comments from you, Barry, as you look at this.
Yeah, no, I don't have a lot to add to this one. I do agree that I think a lot of the reason why the
Oh, it looks like you might have frozen there, Barry. All right, well, we'll catch you up in a second.
one, the more expectation there is that a person's going to be able to do a variety of tasks and kind of pitch in as needed. So there's really no surprise as far as I'm concerned here. And I do agree that that 20% at the top, where it actually starts to go in the other direction, is probably because at that level it's almost all supervision that's happening. It's just higher level approaches, and so you need to know about grant writing maybe, but you're not hands-on in that process to the extent that you might be if you were a program manager or something comparable within the organization.
Move forward here. And so this is where I think we've really been focusing up until this point, really on inside organization grant writing positions, right? But we know that is not the only way to be doing grant writing, as evidenced by you, Barry. And so this is a time for you really just kind of talk to us about your career and how grant writing played a part of that.
Yeah, sure. As I mentioned in the intro part, I actually started out. I was kind of lured into the not-for-profit sector. I was working actually as a writer for a publishing house back in New Orleans, where I'm from, and a friend of mine who was VP for institutional advancement at a university there said to me one time, I cannot find anyone to write grant proposals. I cannot find people with writing skills. Would you give this a try? And so I did. And even though it was a far cry from the type of writing that I was doing, it was really enjoyable. And, one thing led to another. And over the course of my career, as I also mentioned, I started out doing corporate relations, corporate focused grants outreach. But over the course of my career, when I've been in CEO positions, when I've been in program management positions and other things, grants have always been kind of a common theme in everything that I've done. And it was about 7 years ago that I left my last full-time regular ED position because I was having so many conversations from people about consulting and what it might look like if I were to handle a piece of the fundraising for their respective organizations. So in almost every case, and I mean about 80% of the time at least, grant writing was the point of entry for my work with client organizations. And while I'm being anecdotal, I'll share with you that the expectation is that you have a website that talks about you and your company and what you're doing. So I had a website designed, and it was kind of a placeholder website that I had done with the expectation that I would add to it over the course of the years as I increased my client load and things like that. And I've really never needed to go back and to use that website. And that's because word of mouth really opened so many doors for me over the years. And there are about 3 or 4 people who have their own consulting businesses who are always contacting me whenever the client conversation for them turns to grants. And it's been really, really nice. And it's been very rarely have I ever needed to put out feelers saying, I'm available to do grants work. So in that regard, grants have been very good to me. And emphasis also on how grants have opened doors for me to take on other responsibilities with client organizations, including, the several times that I've been asked to be interim CEO. I've been asked to handle strategic planning for organizations. I've been asked to handle capital campaigns, to set up capital campaigns. I do an awful lot of writing, especially this time of the year, for client organizations in need of annual year-end appeal or annual report. That's often in the spring though, but year-end appeal work is something that I do a lot of this time of year. So there's a bit of good news in that. I mean, grants are kind of why we're all assembled here today, and so there's an interest in grants, presumably on everybody's part, and there certainly is a love for it at my end, but it's also nice to vary the grant writing work with other other types of jobs. At any given moment, I'll have probably like 6 to 10 clients, and probably 7 of every 10 will be for grants. And that's a lot of grant writing. And it's a lot of brain energy when you consider that each of these clients comes from a different area. And so, there will be one in the arts, and there will be one that works with the homeless, and one that works with children, and so all of the details, the components of the work really vary a lot. It keeps it interesting, but it can be taxing on the brain. So the grant work that has produced other types of writing assignments has been something that I've been really grateful for, because it's always nice to have that bit of variety. So with the grant writing career that one can have, there are a lot of sort of variations on that theme, the grants theme, that one can really take on. But grants really are what have opened the doors for me with getting new clients, and it's a wonderful process each time, getting to know the new client, understanding what they do, what their needs are, and things like that, and then expanding on that and helping them with some of these other things that I've mentioned, the strategic planning process and other things. And so there's that piece of it, and that's me speaking as a consultant. For people who want to write grants in-house, I think you've done a great job, Elizabeth, of talking about what some of the opportunities there can be, and much of it is about advancement. I've seen so many people who started out working on grants really move up the ladders of the organizations that they've latched onto, and it's been really nice to see. But the starting point on both of these, whether it's consulting and expanding one's consulting work with clients, or in-house grant writing, it always starts with the grants, because it's just such a universally needed thing right now. Sorry about the sirens. I'm in the city.
So, Barry, it's interesting. We've had conversations in the past about, one of the differences of the lifestyle of being the consultant versus being in-house. So I wonder if you can kind of touch on that a little bit. And I know you spent, the last couple of weeks somewhere else, if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, gosh, that's a great way to illustrate the point. Last week, I've traveled and done a lot of pro bono work in Central America, in particular in Guatemala, and I've developed a number of contacts there. And so I go, when it's not pandemic time, I go to Guatemala and other parts of Central America as many as 3 or 4 times a year, and I host grant writing workshops, which are really wonderful ways to tap into some of the good work that's taking place out there. In talking about grants, I feel like I very often talk about, that you can make money and you can advance your career and all of those things. But at the heart of it all, you do some really good service to organizations that you care about when you're a grant writer. And that certainly is the case when I travel to places like Guatemala. And last week when I was there, I had meetings with new clients who most of them are very involved with indigenous people in the area where I go. And one is sort of codifying midwives' practices and sort of the art of being a midwife among indigenous people. Another one is bringing yoga and other types of deep relaxation to the area to set up some courses and programs there. And another was a community, a kind of cooperative of women who weave, textile makers. And so there was kind of a cooperative that was being developed that they were getting a lot of outside funding for. So to me, all of this really keeps the grants process alive, and it balances out some of the ones, some of the clients that may be a little bit less interesting. I as any parent would say, I love all my children, and a grant writer can say the same thing when they have a variety of clients. But some are, in fact, some do stand out, and some are really wonderful. But anyway, it's a great way to really do a lot of good. And last week was a great example of that. And I think the point you were getting at in asking me about this, Elizabeth, is I had my laptop with me. I was in a very remote part of Guatemala, but I was still cranking out grant proposals for my clients who are stateside while I was there, and attended a couple of Zoom conversations. And apart from the tropical birds that were in the background, few people really even knew that I was anywhere besides my home office here.
Yeah, that's a perfect illustration. And I think also as you talk about the difference between being on the consultant side and working with a variety of organizations, so you have different missions and different aspects that you're looking at. When you're in-house, obviously one is really in depth in and steeped in that one organization's mission. However, as a grant writer, you really have to be an expert on any organization you're writing for. And so, for those of you who are looking at that consulting side, just remember you have to be as well versed as the people in-house if you're going to be on the outside.
Absolutely, and that's what keeps it interesting. Is each case is different, each client is different, and you're always learning. You're always adding to your knowledge base about things that very often you never would have imagined yourself being an expert on. And there's something really fun and lively and certainly engaging in all of that.
Absolutely. And I noticed a couple of the people here have not done grant writing before, but there is an interest. And the last time we did one of these webinars, we actually talked about how to get grant writing experience. So I do want to just add that for people that, one of the things you can do is if you're at an organization, I know one of the ways I helped myself move up and get into new positions is I begged for the opportunity to write grants. And so eventually I was given 2 very small grants to write. They were both funded. And then I was able to take those in my next position where I had almost all the qualifications. And one of the things they also wanted was grant writing. I was like, look, I've done some. And that was enough to just kind of get part of that next job and kind of learn more about that and keep going. But if you're looking for those asking for those opportunities, or if you volunteer with an organization and you're really committed to them and you're willing to take the time and actually do it, you can do that for another organization. Is another way to get that experience.
Yeah, and I'll build on that by saying, one of my favorite stories that comes up a lot when I'm doing grant writing workshops is about someone. It was my very first executive director job, working for an organization that had no money whatsoever. We had no budget to pay our existing staff, much less take on a new grant writer. So I got an email from someone, total stranger at the time, who was moving to the Chicago area and asked if I would allow her to get experience as a grant writer by writing grant proposals on behalf of our organization. And there was no question for me when when I read this. Of course, I said yes, and I added to that. I said, if you'll do that for us, I will teach you everything I know about writing grant proposals. And it was a great outcome. She it got us a lot of money that first year. I think we got an additional 60K that was not forecast in that year's budget. And so the board loved her. I loved her. I was able to hire her part-time. She's worked for me quite a bit over the years, and is a good friend, and probably is one of the best grant writers I've ever worked with, just natural ability. But that's, getting a little bit creative when you're in the early stages of a grant career. It's not hard to do. It just takes a little bit of thought and maybe a little bit of daring yourself to make that approach to an organization, to an ED or a program person at an organization, and say, hey, I'll do this for free or at a really reduced rate. And, will you let me uh, take this on for your organization? There are so many struggling organizations out there. It's hard to imagine anyone saying no. Their only concern is probably going to be the time commitment on their part. But that's where you learn to work independently and to be very, very efficient in handling your time when you're in conversation with them. Just be organized, know what you need to ask them about, what support documents you want from them, and such. And you can make the process really, really wonderful for yourself and for the organization. And you've got resume material and a good reference.
Yeah, those are excellent points. And, I also want to add too, in the early days of my career, when I was looking to move up and to get credibility, I was also interested in trying things. I wanted to know what areas of fundraising I liked. I knew I liked fundraising, and I had done a little bit of all of it. So I just wanted to explore the ones that seemed most attractive to me. And I was really lucky that I think it was the second organization I was at, that they funded for me to go and be part of a development class. And with that, it is amazing to me how many doors it opened. And then I went into the advanced class for that as well the following year or two. But what was really great is just having that on my resume. Even if the organization hadn't heard of it before, they knew that I was serious about the profession. They knew that I had devoted time and energy to it. And over again, even years later, it continued to open up doors. So again, like looking at those things that help you kind of move your career forward. Is there anything else you want to share, Barry, before we move on to the next slide?
I think that we've really touched upon a lot of really important points. Yeah, I would just say that our course is really, obviously it's about success in writing grant proposals. And one of the things that I think is different with our course is that we offer a lot of nuances, things that will make your proposal stand out. We were talking about that earlier when we were listing some of the things that we offer. And I just want to shine a little bit of light on that again, because I think it's really, really important to know that this is all about writing a winning grant proposal. You write a winning grant proposal, your client is funded, they're thrilled, you're thrilled because you've done something wonderful, and you've grown professionally. I mean, you've got this broader understanding of how things work, and so. Yeah, I just wanted to sort of underscore that point, and I'll do it here. It may be coming up on a later slide, but I'll just go ahead and do it here because it's having something that having accomplished winning grant proposals is really what's going to continue opening doors for you, and it's really going to solidify your existing relationships. Many of my current clients I've been with for years, and that's just because we work well together. They've got this confidence in me based on what I've seen, and they really view me as an expert in all things grants and a couple of related fundraising topics. So I'll stop there because I think this is going to come up again later in the conversation.
Well, so this is, as you know, we've talked before, this is how you can access the course. And you saw that before. Sorry, the screen wasn't sharing it properly at the time, but you can see here the different ways you can get in if you want to just learn more about it, and then also how to become, how to access the actual course. And so now we want to stop and we want to just open it up for questions. Your questions, you can put them in the chat, or you can unmute and say them directly to Barry. He's so generous with his time to share about being in the profession and what it's like. So I'm going to leave that open for all of you.
Hi, Barry. My name is Robert. I'm sorry, I joined a little later. Where are you from?
Where am I now?
Oh, yes, yeah, now.
Chicago.
Okay,
I'm kind of from all over the place. So that
okay.
question, yeah, right.
Wonderful, wonderful. Same here. So my niche in the nonprofit space is the accounting and tax side of things. And so what I'm doing now is I'm finding that a lot of my clients are asking me some of the questions that's on the grants now. And some of those questions include, how to make, like, they have an impact report, but they're asking for a little more detail instead of just numbers. And so I'm curious to know, for example, in your case, as you're consulting, you receive impact reports so that you can know what to write on grants. How do you have a hard time with that? And how do you help clients in that area? Hopefully I'm asking the right question.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
I think I understand what you're saying. There is, when it comes to numbers, especially vis-a-vis impact, there's always so much information to synthesize. That's number one. Number two, it's not cut and dry. I mean, it's not for some types of organizations, especially a lot of arts organizations. Um, so much of the impact is understood or qualitative. So it's there's no standard way for presenting numbers in reports. It's really going to depend on the type of organization, the mission of the organization, and then from there, the programs of the organization. And then beyond that, different foundations will be looking for different type of feedback. Some are very, very metrics driven, and they're really going to want to see that you've done the computations. Others are looking for kind of the look and feel of how your programs turned out, that sort of thing. So we in the course we talk about reports because they're often neglected. They're often not really presented in a way that they deserve to be presented, because they're kind of a stepping stone to the next grant that you're going to be trying to get from that foundation. Typically a report, unless it's a mid-year report, will be coming out just before your 12-month period is up from the previous request that you're reporting on. And so you're about to ask them for more money. So you want to really position your organization well. So I want to give you a better answer, Robert, but it's, so much of it really depends on the type of organization and exactly what its mission is. There are some that are just not numbers driven. Again, often the arts organizations, by and large, the arts organizations, and so it's really, there's no standard formula, there's no standard form that you fill out usually. So what I would say is to read the guidelines, if there are guidelines from the foundation on exactly what they're looking for in their reports. The one thing that I'll leave you with is it's extremely rare that any foundation wants a super in-depth report. Narratives that I do are usually 1 page long for reports, and sometimes that can be perceived as too long. I did one yesterday for a local foundation. And the entire narrative portion of the report consisted of 2 questions, and they were something like, what are list a couple of the biggest challenges you're facing right now and how you're dealing with them, and what does the year ahead look like to you? And they wanted no more than 10 sentences total for all of that.
Wow.
Topics that broad. I mean, imagine all that
that's
you
hard.
could, yeah, exactly. So it was super high level. There was no data involved in that one, but it was also a literary arts organization, so not a lot expected. So yeah, I would say that I look closely at the guidelines that the foundation gives you, and if they don't have them, include include what data you have, but I would not go into great detail. I would summarize with percentages and things like that. And by the way, Robert, I am always encountering clients who are looking for nonprofit accountants, and it's an area that I wish more people in accounting specialized in, because there's really a demand for it. And I find that so often even established accountants don't really understand all the different corners of nonprofit accounting, all the the things that are particular to that. So yeah, buy billboards, advertise your services.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you for that.
sure.
Thank you very much.
Do we have other questions here today? Okay. All right, we are going to keep moving forward because we're close to the end of our time here. So these are just, you can see the fancy screen change here, but these are just some of the other things that are offered at the Nonprofit Coach. Obviously, the online writing course, there's coaching packages, strategic planning, the executive director support group. There's also board member support group. Both of those happen quarterly. I'm actually, we're doing a partnership with the Sport Philanthropy Network, and we're doing a development director mastermind course that's 3 months long. I think it's about 6 sessions. It's starting October 15th all the way through December. So if you know people who are interested in accelerating their development director skills, so looking for things like that, we're always there to help our nonprofit partners to gain their skills and to meet their goals. And if you are interested in speaking to either me or Barry, here is our contact information. Robert, I see you looking intently, so I know Barry will get it. We'll reach back out to you too.
Yeah, Elizabeth, I just want to say thank you for putting this together. This has been the greatest part of my career, I would say, the consulting as a grant writer, and it's something that I highly recommend. I think the trends are for there to be an awful lot of work in this area. People, as I said earlier, are relying on grants more and more to meet their funding needs, and I don't see that changing. There's a lot of opportunity if people can stay on top of the trends, because as I also said, it's changing really, really fast everywhere. So for those who can try to stay one pace ahead of the crowd, there's an awful lot of work out there, and it's work that this is probably the original remote work. This is something that has been remote since it became a thing, and it's going to stay that way. So it's a great career, and I highly recommend it to people who enjoy working together and kind of get into the research and the creation, sort of the development of arguments in writing.
Yeah, I think it's so perfect. It is one of those things that's really fun when you are really translating the last of oh, sorry, switching over my polls here. When you're really translating the information coming from an organization, particularly like any kind of new program or anything like that, it really just feels, that was one of my favorite parts of grant writing. It's just really exciting. I have launched a new poll. So I'm just going to give you a minute to finish that, and you can just see how that works for you. A couple more people answering. And great, thank you so much. And we're going to keep going here. So thank you all for being here and for taking your time and for your questions. Thank you, Barry, for sharing your expertise. You're always just so generous with your knowledge and your time. And I know that I've learned a lot just working with you over the last year or so. And, you know, even building the course together, just the way that you approach grant writing and the thinking that goes into it, I just really appreciate.
Thank you. Thanks so much. It's a pleasure working with you.
Well, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Go enjoy your afternoon.
So long.
Thank you.
Thank you.